Light and dark are interrelated elements. Your ego may judge the light and dark threads of the tapestry as good or bad, but a non-dualistic view sees them as interrelated. John Tolan biography of Hitler begins with a quote from a Graham Greene character. The greatest saints have been men with a more than a normal capacity for evil, and the most vicious men have sometimes narrowly evaded sanctity. The dark side of the Force is implicit in the Babylon Matrix. We must accept it, but not allow ourselves to be ruled by it. Although history is largely about the dark side of the Force, we must not fully externalize the dark side, but must first grapple with it from within. If you're not aware of the dark side of the Force operating within yourself, then you're in a state of dangerous blindness, and the dark force is able to act as an autonomous complex within you. Many people are in a state of denial about this because dark side of the Force sounds dramatic and exotic, something pertaining to serial killers and Nazis. Actually, it is more often mundane and may be ubiquitous in our thinking. Here's a very mundane example of the dark side of the Force. Now, this was an example I came up with many years ago when I wrote this card. There is someone I am intensely attracted to, but they are unavailable and or do not return the attraction. I feel a force in me that wants them to want me, wants them not to be who they are, but what I want them to be. I feel a force that doesn't want them to be free to choose what they want unless it is also what I want, but that just wants them. Now, obviously, these are forces I locate in myself that I don't act on, but they're genuine forces that, if I didn't have that awareness and buffers on my behavior, could make me a very bad person. And this is what bad persons are, is people who have these same forces inside of them, except that they do act on them. There is a rage inside the Force because it is not getting everything it wants. The rage is not righteous indignation at some injustice, though my mind could try and turn it into that. Like, I never get my fair share. How come look at incels, for example, who think that women should be fairly distributed by the government and that it's an injustice that their lack of social skills mean that they can't find welcoming partners. It is the rage of frustrated, infantile omnipotence. The dark force inside of me assumes that the world is there to satisfy my wants, and everything I want should be there for my taking. The force wants what it wants when it wants it. How dare anyone take what is mine, and it is all mine. So again, this doesn't make me a bad person that I have such a force inside of me, but if I didn't restrain that force and wasn't aware of it, then I might become an egoistic, evil president or something like that. The example above is just one of the myriad versions of the dark side of the Force I can find within myself. Because I also have a will and a conscience and other forces within me, the dark force does not have to rule me, even though I do have to acknowledge and integrate its presence. If there aren't strong enough countervailing forces within me, then the dark thought forms in the above example could turn me into a stalker, a predator, or some other sort of malignant narcissist. Indeed, this is exactly what the dark side of the Force does to many who are out there on the street and in the corridors of power. Here's an example of two people grappling with the dark side of the Force, one in what seems to be a mature way, the other in a way that is immature and or insincere. Pastor Rick Warren, so this was during the, 2008 election when Obama was running against McCain, and so he interviewed each of them, back to back, basically, and so he asked Obama, does evil exist? And if it does, do we ignore it? Do we negotiate with it? Do we contain it? Or do we defeat it? Obama's response. evil does exist. I mean, we see evil all the time. We see evil in Darfur. We see evil in parents who have viciously abused their children. And I think it has to be confronted. It has to be confronted squarely. And one of the things that I strongly believe is that, we are not going to, as individuals, be able to erase evil from the world. Now, the one thing that I think is very important for us is to have humility in how we approach the issue of confronting evil. But, a lot of evil has been perpetrated based on the claim that we were trying to confront evil. And I think one thing that's very important is having some humility and recognizing that, just because we think our intentions are good doesn't always mean that we're going to be doing good. An hour later, Warren asks John McCain, the same question about evil and what we should do about it. McCain's response began this way: defeat it. Grappling with the dark side of the force means grappling with it within as well as without. And the following is a poem written by Stephen Crane, who lived from 1871 to 1900. I stood upon a high place and saw below many devils, running, leaping, and carousing in sin. One looked up grinning and said, "Comrade, brother." And this is a quote from Carl Jung. "There is no such thing in nature as an H-bomb. That is all man's doing. We are the great danger. The psyche is the great danger." So now, if you're interested in this theme of non-dualistic view of reality as related to dark and light, which are throughout the phenomenal worlds, look into what praying mantises do and black widow spiders. It's not just something that's happening in human psychology. So you could see my document, Tolkien and the Developmental Need for Evil. It's linked up at the bottom of the card. My philosophy, Dynamic Paradoxicalism. And then there's some documents there about how it relates to politics. Where I'm most, I did talk about it in this book you can read free on the site, where I get into the dual side. Every archetype has a light and a dark aspect. So the singularity archetype relates to evolutionary metamorphosis and death and foresees positive metamorphic transformation. But every archetype also pathologizes, and one of the major dark sides of the singularity archetype is it easily pathologizes into apocalypticism. And then I call my fantasy epic, also free on the site, Kindle, physical, and Audible version. I think the best version on Amazon. But I call this a trans-Manichaean story. There are some very noble characters, but they are not trying to defeat and eradicate evil. That would be a naive story. They are actually, from a larger vantage, some of the most evil forces imaginable are actually in a kind of evolutionary symbiosis. They are serving a purpose, which I get into in Tolkien and the Developmental Need for Evil. We need darkness to stimulate evolution. So, for example, in the Tolkien mythology, if we were to take out all the ring wraiths and Sauron and Saruman and orcs and so forth, we'd have hobbits having second breakfasts and going out on dates with other hobbits, but we wouldn't have a turning of an age, which is what actually happens in Lord of the Rings. We need a dark force to stimulate that degree of change.